and I rise in support of both the rule and the underlying legislation. I want to begin by sharing my friend from Georgia's enthusiasm about the water bill. I think this was an absolutely masterful piece of work. Three chairmen, obviously primarily Chairman Schuster as the architect, but also working with him on several important Indian issues, Chairman Bishop from Natural Resources, and on the Flint issue in particular, Chairman Upton from Energy and Commerce. And I share my friend's belief that these projects have been worked through in a bipartisan way, and many, many good things, literally in every part of the country, will take place. And our friends on the other side of the aisle were very cooperative in that as well. This is usually a bipartisan effort. It certainly was in this case. I'm very pleased about Flint. There was frankly a failure at every level of government, federal, state, and local. And I'm glad that the Congress is following up on the commitment of the Speaker and our good friend from Michigan, Mr. Kildee, who's been the leader, obviously, in this and doing the right thing there. The water projects themselves, again, touch almost every district in the country, certainly every state in the country. I want to particularly point out the Indian provisions in here, which often get overlooked. We did some really important things working with Mr. Bishop and Mr. Schuster in common. We've settled a number of really important individual Indian water case issues. I think the Bajanga case, for instance, which I know my friend Speaker's familiar with, has been around here for many years. We also changed the definitions in law so Indian tribes can now compete for water projects and water funding, particularly in some of the areas. And again, my friend the Speaker has seen some of the shortages in infrastructure as we've traveled to reservations around the country together. So putting these people in a position to make sure they have access to funds to deal with water is important. And finally, for my own state, and it's extremely important, at no cost to the federal government, the Chickasaws, the Choctaws, the city of Oklahoma City, the state of Oklahoma negotiated a water settlement arrangement inside of Oklahoma for the appropriate distribution of water. That requires federal approval because there's a trust responsibility. We got the deal done, frankly, relatively late this year, and we got tremendous cooperation in Congress and on the Senate. Certainly Jim Inhofe played a big role over there by getting it in the bill to get that memorialized and done in an expeditious fashion. So we're very grateful on that. When it comes to the CR, I certainly support the CR, and certainly appreciate very much the work that Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Lowy did to adjust as much as possible this short-term funding measure to try and deal with what we call around here anomalies and try and get the money to where it's supposed to go. But, and there are many good things, again, in this short-term funding bill through April 28th, my birthday, so perhaps this will work out in the end. Of course, it's also Saddam Hussein's birthday, so that doesn't always work out too well. But at the end of the day, we ought to look at this process, and I find myself in agreement with my good friend from New York and many of the things that she had to say. We should be negotiating an omnibus bill. We have the time to do it. We were told when we passed the short-term CR in late September that that's what we would do in this time frame. And I can assure you, because they did it last year, Chairman Rogers and Ranking Member Lowy could do it again this year. We're pretty close on all of these issues. And it is a mistake, in my view, to push this into next year. Next year we'll have to write the F-18 budget and do the appropriations while we're simultaneously doing this. And the temptation will be very great to just do another CR and pass this on. And while all this seems like budget double talk to the average American, the reality is we've passed a lot of good legislation this year, but the funding isn't matched up with the legislation that we've passed. And that's because we're relying on a continuing resolution as opposed to doing the real hard work of appropriations. Last year when we, by the way, provided us budget stability this year, got us out of a lot of the fights, and guess what? All of a sudden you end up with cures. All of a sudden you end up with WRDA. All of a sudden you get a national defense authorization done because we've done the appropriate things. The Appropriations Committee, I'm quick to add, has done its work. All 12 bills that fund the federal government passed out of appropriations, 5 of them across this floor, including some of the most contentious, like Interior. Our problem partly is our friends in the Senate who blocked up the deal, but we could have still finished an omnibus bill this year. So I support this. I don't think we made a wise decision in the manner in which we're proceeding, but certainly we don't want to shut down the government. And I just want to serve notice to my friends that made the decision. I'm going to hold your feet to the fire so that in April we actually do what we said we were going to do, and that we go back to regular order. With that, Mr. Speaker, urging the passage of the rule and the underlying legislation, I yield back.